August 20th, 1972. The morning sun cast golden rays across Boston Logan International Airport as members of the United States Olympic rowing team prepared for what would be their final training session before departing for Munich, Germany. The 1972 Summer Olympics were just days away, and the pressure was mounting on America's finest athletes. Coach Robert "Bob" Sullivan, a weathered man in his 50s with decades of rowing experience, stood beside a small Cessna 310 aircraft on the tarmac. The twin-engine plane belonged to wealthy businessman and rowing enthusiast Harold Whitman, who had generously offered to fly the team to a secluded training lake in Maine for one last intensive practice session. "All right, boys," Coach Sullivan called out to his team of 6 rowers. "This is our final push before Munich. We've worked 4 years for this moment, and I want you to feel that water one more time before we face the world." The athletes gathered around their coach, their faces a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. There was Mike Rodriguez, 22, the team's stroke rower and natural leader from San Diego. His powerful frame and calm demeanor had earned him respect from teammates and competitors alike. Beside him stood twins David and Daniel Thompson, 20, from Portland, Oregon, whose synchronization in the boat was legendary among collegiate rowing circles. James "Jimmy" O'Connor, 24, the team's oldest member, hailed from Boston and had been rowing since high school. His technical precision made him invaluable to the crew. The youngest, 19-year-old Peter Kowalski from Chicago, bounced slightly on his feet, his youthful energy barely contained. Finally, there was Anthony "Tony" Martinez, 21, from Miami, whose powerful stroke had broken several collegiate records. Harold Whitman, a distinguished man in his early 40s wearing an expensive suit and aviator sunglasses, approached the group. His passion for rowing stemmed from his own Olympic dreams that were cut short by a shoulder injury in the 1950s. Supporting the current generation of athletes had become his way of staying connected to the sport he loved. "Weather looks perfect for flying," Whitman announced, checking his watch. "Clear skies all the way to Moosehead Lake. We should have you boys on the water by noon." The team loaded their gear into the aircraft's cargo compartment. Their racing shell would follow by truck, but they carried their personal equipment, training logs, and Lucky Charms that had accompanied them through years of competition. As they prepared to board, Mike Rodriguez pulled out a small photograph of his girlfriend, Sarah, and kissed it gently. "For luck," he murmured to Jimmy, who stood nearby. "You won't need luck, Mike," Jimmy replied with a grin. "We've got skill." The Cessna 310's engines roared to life at 10:30 a.m. Coach Sullivan took one final look at his clipboard, reviewing training notes he'd been perfecting for months. The weather report showed ideal conditions: clear skies, light winds, and unlimited visibility along their planned route. At exactly 10:45 a.m., the aircraft lifted off from Logan Airport, banking northeast toward Maine. The last radio transmission from Harold Whitman came at 11:15 a.m., reporting their position over the Atlantic Ocean, approximately 50 miles east of Portsmouth, New Hampshire. "Boston Center, this is November 7, 74 Delta Golf. We're at 3,000 feet, maintaining course 045 degrees. Everything looks beautiful up here. The boys are excited to get on the water." Those would be the last words anyone would hear from the aircraft. Chapter 2. The Search Begins. By 2:20 p.m. on August 20th, 1972, concern began to mount at Moosehead Lake. The truck carrying the team's racing shell had arrived on schedule, but there was no sign of the Cessna. The lake's caretaker, an elderly man named Frank Morrison, who had been expecting the team, repeatedly scanned the skies for any sign of the approaching aircraft. Back in Boston, air traffic controllers noticed the missing aircraft when it failed to check in at its scheduled waypoint. The Federal Aviation Administration immediately launched a search and rescue operation, coordinating with the Coast Guard and local authorities. Sarah Mitchell, Mike Rodriguez's girlfriend and a nursing student at Boston University, received the devastating phone call at 4:30 p.m. Her hands trembled as she held the receiver, listening to Coach Sullivan's assistant explain that the team's plane was overdue and presumed missing. "Missing?" Sarah's voice cracked. "What do you mean missing? They were just going to Maine for training." Similar calls were being made to families across the country. In San Diego, Mike's parents, Elena and Carlos Rodriguez, immediately began preparing for the worst while clinging to hope. Elena, a devout Catholic, fell to her knees in prayer, while Carlos, a former Marine, began making calls to anyone who might have influence in expanding the search efforts. The Thompson family in Portland received their news while hosting a neighborhood barbecue in anticipation of watching their twin sons compete in Munich. The celebration turned to anguish as dozens of friends and neighbors stayed throughout the night, offering support and joining in prayer vigils. Coast Guard helicopters scoured the Atlantic waters along the aircraft's planned route. The search area covered hundreds of square miles of ocean, with crews battling choppy seas and deteriorating weather conditions as an unexpected storm system moved in from the northeast. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes, a seasoned Coast Guard officer leading the maritime search efforts, coordinated operations from Coast Guard Station Cape Cod. Her weathered face reflected the grim reality she'd witnessed in dozens of similar searches over her 20-year career. "We've got 6 helicopters in the air and 4 cutters working the grid pattern," she reported to her superiors. "Sea conditions are becoming challenging, but we're not stopping until we find something." The media descended upon the story within hours. The disappearance of Olympic athletes just days before the Munich Games captured national attention. Television news crews set up camp at Logan Airport and at the families' homes, seeking any new information about the missing team. By the evening of August 21st, after more than 30 hours of intensive searching, the Coast Guard had found no trace of the aircraft or its occupants. No oil slicks, no debris, no emergency beacons. It was as if the Cessna 310 had simply vanished into thin air. The families refused to give up hope. Elena Rodriguez organized a massive prayer service at St. Mary's Cathedral in San Diego, which was attended by hundreds of community members. The Thompson twins' high school rowing team in Portland held a vigil at the boathouse where David and Daniel had first learned to row. As days turned into weeks, the official search was scaled back, though it never officially ended. The 1972 Munich Olympics proceeded without the American rowing team that had trained so hard to compete. Their empty lanes in the rowing events served as a somber reminder of the tragedy that had befallen American athletics. The families established a foundation in honor of the missing athletes, providing scholarships for young rowers from underprivileged backgrounds. But the question that haunted everyone remained unanswered. What had happened to Flight N774DG and the 7 souls aboard? Chapter 3. Life goes on, but questions remain. 20 years passed, and the mystery of the missing Olympic rowing team had become one of aviation's most perplexing unsolved cases. The families had learned to live with the uncertainty, though the pain never fully subsided. Memorial services were held annually on August 20th, bringing together rowing communities from across the nation to honor the missing athletes. Sarah Mitchell, now Sarah Patterson after marrying a fellow nurse in 1978, had built a successful career as a head nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. She had 2 teenage children but still kept Mike Rodriguez's photograph on her dresser, along with the letters he had written to her during their 3-year relationship. Every August, she would take time off work to visit the small memorial, erected at the Boston Rowing Club where Mike had trained. The families had aged, some had passed away, but the core group of parents and siblings maintained regular contact. Carlos Rodriguez, now 72, had become a spokesman for families of missing persons, advocating for improved aviation safety measures and extended search protocols. His wife Elena had passed away in 1985, never knowing what had happened to their son. The Thompson family had established a successful rowing program at their local high school, with David and Daniel's younger sister, Patricia, now serving as head coach. She had been only 12 when her brothers disappeared, and rowing had become her way of staying connected to their memory. In 1992, technological advances in underwater exploration had revolutionized marine archaeology and recovery operations. The United States Navy's Deep Submergence Unit, based in San Diego, had developed sophisticated sonar equipment capable of mapping the ocean floor with unprecedented accuracy. Commander Jack Morrison, Patricia Thompson's husband, and a career Navy officer specializing in underwater recovery, had heard the story of the missing rowing team countless times over their 15-year marriage. The case had always intrigued him from a professional standpoint. How could a large aircraft simply disappear without leaving any trace? In early 1992, Commander Morrison's unit was conducting routine deep-sea mapping exercises off the coast of New England as part of a larger oceanographic survey. The Navy was testing new sonar technology that could penetrate deeper into the ocean floor and provide more detailed imaging than ever before. On March 15, 1992, sonar technician First Class Maria Santos was operating the advanced sonar equipment aboard the USS Capable, a Navy research vessel, when she detected an unusual anomaly on the ocean floor approximately 80 miles east of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. "Commander, I'm seeing something down there that doesn't match the natural topography," Santos reported, adjusting her equipment for a clearer reading. "It's metallic, definitely man-made, and it's big enough to be an aircraft." Commander Morrison studied the sonar images carefully. The object was resting in approximately 400 feet of water, far deeper than most recreational diving operations could reach. Its size and shape were consistent with a twin-engine aircraft, and it appeared to be largely intact. "Run the coordinates against known wreck sites," Morrison ordered. When the search came back negative, he felt his pulse quicken. Could this be the missing Olympic team's aircraft? The location was remarkably close to the last known position reported by Harold Whitman 20 years earlier. Morrison immediately contacted his wife Patricia, who broke down in tears upon hearing the news. After 2 decades of wondering, there might finally be answers. Chapter 4. The Recovery On. April 2, 1992, the USS Capable returned to the coordinates with a full deep-sea recovery team and the Navy's most advanced remotely operated vehicle, ROV. The families of the missing athletes had been notified of the potential discovery, and several had traveled to Cape Cod to be present during the recovery operation. Commander Morrison stood on the ship's deck alongside Carlos Rodriguez, now a frail but determined 72-year-old man, who had never stopped searching for answers about his son's fate. Patricia Thompson Morrison was there as well, representing her missing brothers and serving as the family liaison for the operation. The ROV descended slowly through the dark Atlantic waters, its powerful lights illuminating the ocean floor as it approached the wreckage. At exactly 2:30 p.m., the remotely operated vehicle's cameras provided the first clear images of the aircraft that had been missing for nearly 20 years. "That's definitely a Cessna 310, announced Navy salvage expert Chief Petty Officer Robert Kim, studying the live video feed. "The registration numbers are still visible. N774DG. This is your missing plane." Carlos Rodriguez gripped the ship's railing as tears streamed down his weathered face. "Mijo," he whispered in Spanish, using the affectionate term he had always called his son, Mike. "We found you." The aircraft was remarkably well preserved in the cold Atlantic depths. The ROV's cameras revealed that the plane appeared to have made a controlled descent into the water with minimal impact damage to the fuselage. The cabin windows were intact, though covered in marine growth after 2 decades on the ocean floor. Over the next 3 days, Navy divers and ROV operators carefully documented the wreck site and prepared for the complex recovery operation. The aircraft would need to be raised in sections to prevent further damage and to properly recover the remains of the 7 men who had perished. On April 5, 1992, exactly 19 years, 7 months, and 16 days after the Cessna 310 had disappeared, the aircraft's main section was lifted from the ocean floor. As it broke the surface of the Atlantic, a moment of profound silence fell over everyone aboard the USS Capable. The recovery revealed crucial evidence about the aircraft's final moments. Aviation investigators who examined the wreckage determined that the plane had experienced a sudden and catastrophic engine failure, likely due to fuel contamination. Harold Whitman, an experienced pilot, had apparently attempted an emergency water landing, which explained the aircraft's relatively intact condition. Inside the aircraft, personal effects were recovered and carefully preserved. Mike Rodriguez's photograph of Sarah was found in his jacket pocket, remarkably protected by a waterproof wallet. Jimmy O'Connor's training log contained his final entry, written the morning of the flight. "Ready for Munich. This is our time." The remains of all 7 men were recovered and returned to their families for proper burial. After 20 years of uncertainty, parents, siblings, and loved ones finally had closure. The memorial services that followed were attended by thousands, including Olympic officials, fellow athletes, and members of the international rowing community. Sarah Patterson attended Mike Rodriguez's funeral in San Diego, placing a bouquet of roses on his casket along with the letters he had written to her during their courtship. "I never stopped loving you," she whispered as she said her final goodbye. The recovery made national headlines, with major television networks documenting the story of how advanced Navy technology had finally solved one of aviation's enduring mysteries. The case became a testament to the importance of never giving up hope and the power of technological advancement in providing answers to long-standing questions. Carlos Rodriguez lived for 2 more years after his son's recovery, passing away peacefully in 1994 at the age of 74. His final words to his daughter were reportedly, "Now I can see Elena and Miguel again." The Rodriguez family had finally found peace after more than 2 decades of uncertainty. The story of the missing Olympic rowing team served as a reminder of the risks that athletes and their supporters take in pursuit of excellence and the importance of cherishing every moment with loved ones. The recovered aircraft was eventually displayed at the Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum, where it stands as a memorial to the 7 men who gave their lives in pursuit of Olympic dreams that would never be fulfilled. Today, the annual memorial service continues, now held at the crash site coordinates, where Navy ships drop wreaths into the Atlantic waters. The tradition serves as a reminder that while dreams may be interrupted by tragedy, the human spirit's capacity for hope, love, and perseverance endures forever.